The cafe smelled faintly of roasted beans and polished wood, the kind of place where conversations were meant to stay quiet and controlled. I arrived early, 10 minutes, to be exact, not out of nervousness, but habit. In my world, being late was never an option. Timing, precision, presentation, those things were ingrained long before I ever stepped into ordinary spaces like this. I chose a table by the window, where the late afternoon light filtered in just enough to make everything look softer than it really was. Outside, people passed by without a second glance, unaware that inside, something quietly transactional was about to unfold. When she entered, I didn't need an introduction to know who she was. She carried herself with a kind of effortless authority, the sort that comes from years of being listened to without question. Her posture was perfect, her expression composed, and her eyes sharp, evaluating everything in seconds. She spotted me immediately, of course. People like her always did. "You must be—" she began as she approached, already pulling out the chair across from me. "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone even. She sat down without waiting for an invitation, placing her handbag neatly on the table as if she owned not just the space, but the moment itself. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," she said, though her voice suggested this had never been a request. "I was curious," I answered honestly. That seemed to amuse her, just slightly. A flicker of something passed across her face. Interest, maybe, or mild surprise that I hadn't tried to impress her. "I'll be direct," she said, leaning forward just enough to signal that this wasn't going to be a long conversation. "My son is distracted lately." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "And you," she continued, her gaze settling firmly on me, "are the distraction." There it was. No accusation, no raised voice, just a statement delivered with absolute certainty. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim envelope, placing it gently on the table between us. The motion was precise, deliberate, practiced. "There's $10,000 in there," she said. "Cash." My eyes flicked to the envelope, but I made no move to touch it. "You will take it," she went on, "and in return, you will remove yourself from his life, completely. No calls, no messages, no dramatic goodbyes. You simply disappear." Her tone remained calm, almost polite, as if she were offering a professional arrangement rather than attempting to erase someone from her son's life. I leaned back slightly, studying her. Not with anger, not even with offense, but with quiet curiosity. It wasn't the offer itself that interested me. It was the assumption behind it. "Is that what I'm worth?" I asked. For a fraction of a second, something in her expression tightened. "It's more than generous," she replied smoothly, "for someone in your position." There it was again. That quiet certainty. That belief that she understood exactly who I was, what I valued, and how easily I could be managed. I almost smiled. If she only knew. The envelope sat untouched between us, a neat little symbol of everything she thought this situation was. Simple, containable, solvable with the right number. "And if I don't take it?" I asked, my voice still calm. Her eyes sharpened slightly, the warmth, if there had ever been any, vanishing completely. "Everyone has a price," she said. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. Not for me, but for her. Then, slowly, I reached forward and picked up the envelope. It was light, lighter than she probably expected it to feel in my hands. I turned it once, thoughtfully, as if considering the weight of her offer, not in money, but in meaning. Then I placed it back down exactly where it had been. "Not everyone," I said quietly. For the first time since she sat down, she didn't immediately respond. And in that brief pause, something shifted. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. She had expected resistance, maybe even emotion. What she hadn't expected was indifference. That evening, the air felt different, heavier somehow, like something unspoken had settled into the walls. I had just set my keys down when there was a knock at the door. Not hesitant, not aggressive, just urgent. I already knew it was him. When I opened the door, he stood there slightly out of breath, like he'd come straight from wherever he was without stopping to think it through. His hair was a mess, his expression somewhere between worried and determined. "She met you, didn't she?" he asked immediately. No greeting, no small talk. I stepped aside to let him in. "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair as he walked in, pacing once across the room before turning back to me. I told her not to interfere. I knew she would, but I thought... He stopped himself, exhaling sharply. "What did she say?" I watched him for a moment, taking in the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened as he waited for an answer. He already suspected the truth, he just didn't know how bad it was. "She offered me money to leave you," I said plainly. His reaction was instant. "I'm so sorry, that's..." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "That's completely out of line. I swear I didn't know she'd go that far." 10,000, I added. He blinked, the anger on his face faltering for a second. "That's it?" I raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's exactly what I thought." A short, almost disbelieving laugh escaped him before he caught himself. I mean, no, it's not funny. It's just, she really thought that would work? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I moved toward the shelf near the window, running my fingers lightly along its surface as I considered how much to say and how much to reveal. Up until now, none of this had mattered. Not to me, not to him, but things had changed the moment she placed that envelope on the table. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more cautious. I reached for a small velvet box tucked neatly between a stack of books. It was unremarkable at a glance, something you could easily overlook if you didn't know what it was. I turned back and handed it to him. "Open it." He hesitated for just a second before flipping it open. Inside, resting against the dark velvet, was a signet ring, elegant, understated, but unmistakable in its design, its crest etched with precision that spoke of history, not decoration. His expression changed immediately. "Wait," he said slowly, his eyes lifting to meet mine. "This is—" "Yes," I said calmly. He looked back down at the ring, then up at me again, searching my face like he was trying to piece together something that suddenly didn't make sense. "You're—" "I didn't think it was relevant," I interrupted gently. He stared at me, still holding the box, his mind clearly racing. "Not relevant? This is the kind of thing people don't just casually not mention." A faint smile touched my lips, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. In my experience, mentioning it tends to complicate things unnecessarily. "So, your family is, what, royal? Political? Both?" he asked, half joking, half completely serious. "Something like that," I replied. "Old money, older expectations, and a very structured life that I prefer to step outside of whenever I can." He let out a slow breath, closing the box carefully, like it suddenly carried more weight than before. "And the 10,000 is less than what I spend without thinking about it," I said, not arrogantly, just factually. Silence settled between us again, but this time it was different. He wasn't just processing what his mother had done anymore. He was processing me. "So, you're not with me because of anything like that?" he asked finally, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze directly. "If I cared about money," I said, "I would have walked away long before your mother ever tried to pay me to." He let out a small, almost breathless laugh, shaking his head. "I don't even know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything," I replied softly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me again, more steadily this time. "You stayed," he said. "I did. Despite all of this," I held his gaze, despite all the reasons I probably shouldn't have. That seemed to land, not dramatically, not loudly, just honestly. And somehow that made it matter more. The message arrived the next morning, brief, formal, and entirely unsurprising. She wanted to meet again. No apology, no acknowledgement of the previous encounter, just a time, a place, and the clear expectation that I would show up. This time, the location wasn't a cafe. It was her home. The estate stood behind tall iron gates that opened with quiet efficiency as my car approached. Everything about the place was deliberate. Immaculate gardens, perfectly trimmed hedges, the kind of architecture designed to impress without needing to try too hard. Wealth, but controlled. Power, but refined. I stepped out, taking in the stillness. It wasn't peaceful, it was curated. A staff member greeted me at the entrance and led me inside without unnecessary conversation. Polished floors, high ceilings, carefully chosen art. Every detail reinforced the same message. This was a space where decisions were made, not questioned. She was waiting in a sitting room flooded with natural light, seated exactly where one would expect her to be, centered, composed, already in control of the narrative she believed was about to unfold. "I assume you've reconsidered?" she said as I entered. No greeting, no wasted time. "I have," I replied. She gestured toward the chair across from her. "Good. Let's finalize this quickly." I didn't sit. Instead, I remained standing, just enough to shift the balance of the room in a way she hadn't anticipated. "I'm not here to take your offer," I said evenly. "I'm here to return it." For the first time, something flickered across her expression, annoyance perhaps, or the faintest hint of impatience. "I see," she said, her tone cooling. "Then I hope you're here with a more realistic counter." I stepped forward and placed the envelope on the table between us, untouched, exactly as she had given it to me. "I never opened it," I said. Her eyes dropped briefly to the envelope, then back to me. "That's not the statement you think it is." "No," I agreed calmly. "It's a clarification." Her posture straightened slightly. "You're making a mistake." "Actually," I replied, "you already did." That landed. Her gaze sharpened, the air in the room tightening just slightly. "Excuse me?" "You misjudged me," I continued, my voice steady. "Not just my intentions, but my position." A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a simple card, unremarkable at first glance, but precise in its design. No excess, no flash, just a name, a crest, and a level of detail that didn't exist by accident. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. She looked at it casually at first, then more carefully, then again. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Her fingers paused against the edge of the card. Her expression didn't collapse or dramatize. It tightened, controlled, but no longer certain. "This isn't possible," she said quietly. "It is," I replied. Silence settled over the room, heavier this time. "You could have said something," she added after a moment, her voice lower now, less commanding and more measured. "I could have," I said, "but it wouldn't have changed anything important." Her eyes lifted to mine again, searching, not for weakness this time, but for confirmation. "Status matters," she said, though there was less conviction behind it now. "Respect matters more," I corrected gently. That seemed to unsettle her more than anything else I'd said. Because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't confrontational, it was certain. "You believe that?" she asked. "I live that," I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. She leaned back slightly, studying me in a way she hadn't before. Not as a problem to solve, but as something she hadn't fully understood. "And my son?" she asked finally. "What about him? Is he just an exception to your principles?" I shook my head once. "He's the reason they matter." That answer stayed with her. I could see it in the way her expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to reveal something beneath the surface she worked so hard to maintain. "You're asking me to trust something I don't control," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm asking you to recognize that you never did." That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly, not visibly, but fundamentally. She glanced once more at the envelope, then at the card, and finally back at me. The certainty she'd walked in with was gone. Not replaced with weakness, but with something far less comfortable. Awareness. Weeks passed before I saw her again. There were no sudden messages this time, no carefully worded summons framed as a courtesy. When the invitation finally came, it was different, short, but noticeably more measured. It included both of us, not just me. That alone said enough. Dinner, at her home. No conditions attached. I almost declined, not out of fear or discomfort, but because I understood what it meant. This wasn't just a meal. It was an attempt to reset something that had started with control and miscalculation. Whether that reset would succeed was another matter entirely. In the end, I agreed. When we arrived, the estate felt the same as before. Flawless, composed, almost too perfect. But the atmosphere had shifted in a way that was difficult to define. Subtle, but real. The staff greeted us politely, though this time there was no sense of quiet evaluation behind their professionalism. She met us at the entrance, not waiting inside, not seated in a position of quiet authority, standing. "Thank you for coming," she said. It was a small thing, simple, expected even. But the difference was in how she said it. We moved into the dining room together, the three of us taking our seats without the unspoken tension that had defined every previous interaction. The table was set with precision, as everything in her home always was, but tonight it felt less like a stage and more like an actual place to sit and talk. For a while, conversation stayed safely neutral. Work, travel, small observations, nothing that mattered enough to disrupt the fragile balance that had been established. But none of us were there for that. Eventually, she set her glass down and looked at me directly. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words didn't come easily, but they came clearly. I held her gaze for a moment before nodding once. "You do." Beside me, her son nearly choked on his drink, coughing as he tried, and failed to hide his reaction. I didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for softening the truth. She noticed that, and to her credit, she didn't retreat from it. "I judged you unfairly," she continued, "and arrogantly." "That's accurate," I replied. A brief silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, something shifted. Not in me, in her. A quiet exhale, the smallest hint of a smile. "You're not easily intimidated," she said. "I've had practice," I answered. That earned a soft laugh, genuine this time, not controlled or calculated. "I imagine you have," she said, studying me with a kind of curiosity that hadn't been there before, though I suspect I underestimated what that meant. "You underestimated a lot of things," I replied evenly. Her son glanced between us, clearly unsure whether he should intervene or simply stay out of it. He chose wisely and stayed silent. She tilted her head slightly, considering my words, rather than resisting them. "Yes," she admitted. "I did." Another pause settled over the table, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt necessary, like both of us were allowing space for something more honest than anything we'd said before. Finally, she glanced down briefly, then back up. 10,000 was clearly, she began, then stopped, choosing her words more carefully this time. "Inappropriate." Inaccurate, I corrected. That made her smile again, wider now, more natural. Still missing the point, I suppose. Yes, I said simply. And yet, this time, there was no tension in the correction. Only clarity. Dinner continued after that, but something fundamental had changed. The conversation grew easier, not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was being forced anymore. There were no performances, no hidden negotiations behind polite words. Just three people, sitting together, learning how to exist in the same space without trying to control it. When the evening came to an end, we stood near the entrance once more. For a brief moment, it felt like that first meeting again. Same place, same people, but not the same dynamic. She looked at her son, then at me. Take care of him, she said. There was no demand in it, no test, just something quieter, something real. I met her gaze without hesitation. I already do. She held that for a second, then gave a small nod. And for the first time, she didn't look like someone trying to manage outcomes or maintain authority. Just a mother, slowly learning how to let go.